Shoe maketh the man. Well, here's one in the service of another. Absolutely un uomo. And the shoe definitely helped make it this man, Michael Jordan, into a billionaire. To be precise, give or take a few million, he's a $2.2 billion man, partly thanks to his shoes. He's also connected to the faith that was evident in the previous two photographs, because Michael Jordan's number 23 refers to the Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Well, another basketball player definitely not wanting is LeBron James. I'm not sure I want a gold and diamond shoe, but these Nikes were dipped in gold. So this is gold dipped crocodile leather with lace tips that are diamond encrusted with the world champion on them. And you might want to upgrade to these, by the way. It was a gift to him when LeBron James, hit 30,000 NBA points milestone in his career. So it's a huge achievement, but really golden shoes. Oh, well. So a very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us for our 63rd presentation. I just realized I have the wrong date in there. I'm ahead of us. This presentation is about shoes. And we are taking a less is more visual approach in the hope that something that is absent makes itself present, because definitely those are bare feet shown here. So someone had asked me the other day, how do I select topics? They really announce themselves to me. I don't sit there and think of a topic. Something catches my interest and I say, oh, I know nothing about this, which is just about everything. And so then I just charge down that rabbit hole. So for example, this magazine cover for the actress Zendaya, this cover was from a few years ago, had caught my attention. And to be exact, it was that shoe accoutrement of hers that had caught my eye. I was very, very curious because I blew up the picture of her foot. If her stylist knew about the Egyptian connection, because golden-toed sandals are not new. So ancient Egypt was awash in gold. And so they had golden shoes much earlier than LeBron James or anyone of his ilk. And Egyptians certainly didn't hanker over any character like a Midas touch. They had more gold than they cared to do anything with. So when I shared that detail with my daughter, she just looked at me and rolled her eyes. Now, I realize esoteric knowledge like that puts me in the realm of the, let's just say it, eccentric, but I'm okay with that. I like being curious. I like that curiosity feeds my mind and it lets my imagination travel. And so this idea of travel is salient to today's presentation. In fact, it's the essence of shoes, regardless of what they look like, because these two are shoes from Egypt, from the ancient periods. Shoe denotes traveling. Caveat again, unless you're the type who wears slippers and go to sleep, there is no other purpose. No one wears a shoe just to sit around. You will take them up before you go to bed. So the bottom line for any shoe, heels, flat foot, whatever it is, they are connected to traveling without fail. And so this is about movement. That song, Boots Are Made for Walking. And that's what we'll do today. We are going to take a journey, starting with these non-golden reed ones from North Africa. And we'll soon see that such practical overshoes, because that's what they are, they go over the shoe that we were wearing, continued in the same style well into the 19th century. Because as always, that's the part of the traveling we're talking about. These designs travel. History repeats through all of this. So this 2,000-year-old shoe is made out of several layers of hemp sewn together in a similar way to quilting. So if you look at it, that's what this is like, textile shoes. Examples like these, like this one actually, is found on the feet of the terracotta soldiers from Xi'an, albeit they're not textiles, they're made of terracotta, as the name suggests. Roman sandals were usually unisex and made with cork soles and leather straps, or sometimes they had laces. And some military sandals had hobnails on the soles to reinforce the design. And these hobnail imprints could leave patterns and messages on the ground. And I had smiled upon learning that because two of my own shoes have soles that imprint my name. It's not that I'm narcissistic. I had just thought that would be so cool. So two of them do that. And my daughter had asked, do you walk through water to make a imprint? And I said, no, I don't. If it happens to do so, it does so. It's easy to do. And so that's the way I make my bespoke shoes. It says Shoma on the back. I thought I was being clever, but obviously not, because 2000 years ago, they had that idea down pat. But I figured, better late than never. But if you look at this now, doesn't this lacing, I'm going to point to it, this, semblance of a lacing, remind you, look at it, of one of the best selling Jimmy Choo sandals, the Lance. It's quite an appropriate military name because I'm juxtaposing the two designs, but I doubt that's what the inspiration was. And by no means am I implying that the Roman sandal was the inspiration for Jimmy Choo. However, research is evident in the designs by the brand Jimmy Choo. The brand was founded by a Tamara Mellon, who used to be the associates editor at British Vogue. And it was a collaboration with a Malaysian shoe designer, Jimmy Choo. And whom you're seeing is Choo's niece, Sandra Choi, who still remains, last I checked, the creative director. The reason I'm including her is I hope it's evident to all of you that I love researching. And I have seen a few of Miss Choi's interviews. She lives in research. And I imagine a kindred solitary spirit. The amount of research this woman does, it's evident in her interviews. It is incredibly inspiring. It's very amazing how her mind travels. And ever since Carrie Bradshaw uttered those simple lines, I lost my chew, and while she was running through, I think, Staten Island Ferry at the turn of the millennia, Jimmy Choo has been synonymous with this TV phenomena, Sex and the City. And I really wonder, would Carrie wear these architectural splendors? And I'm calling them architectural splendors because they were designed by the architect Zaha Hadid. I actually like the box more than I like the shoe. But Zaha Hadid has designed shoes for another French brand, also Lacoste. She's done other stuff as well, but they design more than just buildings. So hopefully, some of this information so far was new to you, because I would really dislike wasting your time. So the Nourishment Project is about joyous curiosity and being part of something much, much larger than ourselves. Here are some of the references that inform this presentation. So the adage, shoe maketh the man, is definitely true for the story Puss in Boots. I'm sure you know the story, so I'll read the version that I know. So it was given to me in poem form, and it says in there, so I'll read it out. A miller lay dying. He made his last will. He left his 3 sons, his cat, ass, and mill. To the eldest the mill, to the second the ass. The third had the cat, and he cried out, alas! I must starve now, unless I take pussy to eat. No, master, said Puss, give me boots to my feet. A pair of top boots, and please leave me alive, and you shall just see how we'll flourish and thrive. Flourish they did, all due to the clever cat's resourcefulness. The suaveness lent by the boots to the cat eventually helped the cat transform his poor master into a Marquis de Carabas. And eventually this supposedly titled boy, and he was a good boy, got him married to the king's daughter. You can see the clever cat in the background, the puss in those yellow boots. And I like the yellow colored boots. It's the imperial Chinese color. All these details I love discovering. And so from Walter Crane illustrations to an illustration of the cat done by Andy Warhol. And you see, this cat has shoes as well. It was just a happy coincidence, but I doubt it. I'm not sure if cats were a recurring theme for Mr. Warhol, because shoes surely were. So Andy Warhol's first break came from illustrating shoes for Glamour magazine in the 1950s. He was actually born Andy Warhola, so there was an A there. And the misprint had transformed Mr. Warhola to Mr. Warhol, and he just stuck with it. So shoe designs helped him climb the ladder of success because they were very, very famous. They helped sell shoes for this company then. And this design being shown, and there are tons of them. This design personified Julie Andrews as a classical Cinderella-like pump. And the reason it was done that way, because at the time of this design of the shoe, Julie Andrews was in town for the Broadway My Fair Lady. And so it seemed appropriate that he design a Cinderella-themed shoe. Another example of his design of shoes, representing Truman Capote's musical House of Flowers. Here is Warhol's Gold Leaf Mule. This is representing Capote's flamboyance. So that's how it was done. You can look all of these up. I love the internet. You can have access to all of this. And it's chosen for that way. So if you're curious, start here and go have fun. So Warhol's shoe designs have appeared on dresses and handbags in Christian Dior's collections. It continuously does so. Warhol was here a few years ago. Well, not him. His exhibition was here at the Art Institute just less than 4 years ago, I think, because history does repeat. And most fashion houses, be it Fendi, Dior, Armani, Prada, all of it, any of them, you name them, they design footwear. Here is Burberry's version of a man's sandal. Some call a man's sandal a mandal, M-A-N-D-A-L. I don't, nor will I ever do so. So, sandals come in a wide variety. This one reminded me of sandals found in the desert caves close to that of the Dead Sea. And, it's rather appealing, the simple designs with the soles made of thick pieces of leather that are sewn together, and the upper parts are made of straps of leather. You can just see going through the toes. And I suspect this is likely what Jesus would wear. And as due diligence, I looked at many of Jesus's footwear, obviously in paintings. He wasn't photographed, not that I know. And the lack of shoes, sometimes he's not wearing shoes, was quite telling. But this one surprised me the most. I didn't choose it because of its artistic virtuosity, far from it. I mean, not that it's bad. Look at the shoe. They're two different sandals. So I actually stared at it for a while. I'm like, what's this? And then I realized, I suppose what the artist was trying to communicate is that the sandal had probably torn and Jesus had improvised. I suppose there wasn't a Neiman Marcus nearby hiding in the bushes somewhere. And perhaps the Son of God wasn't a spendthrift. It would make sense. His devout shepherds do take the vow of poverty, don't they? So it just made sense that he would have fixed his shoe like that. I like the child. But look at the irony, vow of poverty. I don't really associate the Vatican City with poverty. Pope Benedict, shown here, or that part of his body, was slyly called Pope Prada due to his dapper footwear. Now that is patently unfair because red shoes has precedence in the Catholic Church. So the shoes' origins go back to Byzantine days because they used to be donned by Norman kings as symbols of bloody martyrdom. That's why they used to wear red shoes. And so the Byzantine successors, the Roman emperors, stuck with that. In fact, red shoes became the standard high fashion accessory for aristocrats across the board. So if your shoes were red, you were somebody. And the Pope is certainly somebody. And he usually has two kinds of red shoes. The indoor liturgical slippers, which were made of silk, which not made were, they made are of silk and gold brocade, and an outdoor loafer-like pair that is often just plain red. So now Pope John Paul, he wore brownish loafers. And so one must admit, Catholic leaders have historically exhibited a daring sense of style over their 2,000 years in the high office. I mean, look at their panache. Which other men outside the rap or hip hop community can get away with red slippers, fur trimmed capelets, ruby bling, white skull caps, and engraved chalices? They are completely binged out. You should see their crowns. They wear stuff like this. So honestly, in context of that, what better to pair that red velvet, white ermine fur trimmed cape than a matching cap? So Pope Benedict XVI pulled off that look during a 2005 St. Peter's Square appearance. But upon called Santa Pope, he never wore that again. Poor guy. And he limited himself to the red shoes. So he brought back, not heralded, the red shoes that John Paul had discarded. So John Paul wore brown loafers. Pope Benedict brought back the red ones. So these swanky, sacred carmine slippers harkens traditions, and they were an expression of his conservative positions within the church. So even though red signals, oh, look at me, his positions were very, very conservative. And just to clarify, though the devil may wear Prada, the Pope certainly cannot, because Pope Benedict's shoes had been designed by the Italian Adriano Stefanelli. By the way, in case somebody hadn't seen the movie, Devil Wear Prada is the name of a movie. I wasn't saying popes wear Prada because the devil wears Prada, nothing of the sort. I expect my audience is much sharper than me and have a wicked sense of humor. No offense is ever meant. So in our area, the days nowadays, we have the much less traditional Papa Francesco, Pope Francis, and he has gone back to basics with his sartorial tendencies, because he's the one, instead of getting a new ring cast, as is the typical practice when the new Pope comes, he chose a hand-me-down. He rides buses, he gives TED Talks, and as you can see, he wears solidly simple black shoes. Laudato Si. I like him. Equally magical as the biblical ones, here are the red shoes from The Wizard of Oz. Speaking of other entertaining shoe references, on the left is the classic British film, The Red Shoes, because after trying on a pair of red ballet shoes, this ballerina couldn't stop dancing. On the right, no good ever comes from a woman losing a shoe, with the exception, obviously, of Cinderella and her infamous glass slipper. Good for you, you lost your shoe, girl, you go. But while I was doing this, I was thinking, do you think this was the reference from Sex and the City when you had the Carrie Bradshaw's character cry out, I lost my chew? You know, could it have been? I wouldn't have been surprised. It would be just a clever, subtle tie-up with Cinderella. Because I've always felt Sex and the City was like a younger Golden Girls, because they had the same creative writers. There's so many overlaps in these. So maybe they did go back to Cinderella. Who knows? I like to think so. So the entertainment aspect continues. On the left, the photo of Marilyn Monroe standing over a Subway grate for the 7-year Itches promotional shoot wouldn't be complete without a white strappy high heels, at least in our memories, though I don't think most people are looking at their shoe. I was. On the right, Jane Fonda's Barbarella saves the galaxy in her silver knee-high boots, and as you can patently tell, very little else. They must be super shoes. All right, leather boots again, albeit black ones. These boots cemented Julia Roberts' career through Pretty Woman. And refuting the validity of Roy Orbison's song Pretty Woman, I feel quite a few women do look as good, if not better, than Julia Roberts in leather boots, because the song goes, pretty woman, walk on by, make me cry, whatever. No one can look as good as you. That's not true. A lot of people can, and they do. Starting with Michelle Pfeiffer, the Catwoman. Puss in Boots, indeed. There she is. So now if we continue with the bestiary theme, look at this beauty. Look at the cranes on the boots. Isn't that just beautiful? Now that we have cranes, snakes on boots. I want these both for the color and the material. I think they are fabulous. And so from sexy to shabby, shoes in Charlie Chaplin's movie, The Gold Rush. So in the movie, for those who have seen it, hunger forces his character to eat his shoe. Chaplin was a notorious perfectionist, and he had 20 pairs of licorice shoes, boots actually, made for the scene in which the lone prospector and Big Jim McKay feast on a single shoe for their Thanksgiving dinner. So that's how that worked out. So now I'm going to do something different, not too vastly different, but we are going to play a game. For the next few slides, you'll be shown a movie poster. And what I want you to do is come up with a popular shoe-related adage for it. So this is the Charlie Chaplin movie, The Tramp. And so The Tramp is obviously about a bum, a hobo who's, knocked around by life. If you can guess the adage, please just unmute and share. What proverb or adage do you think goes with this idea of the movie The Tramp? I'll say it. So it'll be a sample one. Down at the heels, because that's what it means. Down at the heels. You're shabby looking, showing signs of deterioration because his shoes are giving away, his clothes are given away. He's not cared for. So that's how we're going to play the next few games. Now, this is a very big clue, the name phobia. So it's about anxiety and stress. What's the appropriate shoe adage here? I want to have the sound from Jeopardy, da 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 da, or maybe that's from Jaws, I don't know. Okay, I'll tell you. This one is where the shoe pinches, is where you feel that, sand in your pocket, the uncomfortableness, the stress and anxiety. So that's the adage associated with the movie Phobia. Next one. This movie is called The Goldfinger. Very, very funny movie. Steve Martin played a director who has zero money. So he hires Eddie Murphy playing like the dweeby brother of a famous movie star who just looks like the famous movie star. And so he's got no money to make the movie. That's almost a dead giveaway. What do you think the term is for somebody who has no money to make a movie? Shoestring budget. Come on now, it's easy. We've got more. Don't give up. So you may not have seen this movie, but Final Destination is a teen scream movie franchise. You just go, and you yell. They're supposed to be horror. You just laugh at this. This is not The Exorcist whatsoever. So in general, death follows some hapless kids who, avoided dying. So death is going to get them. So what do you think the appropriate shoe proverb is? Death is stalking them. They know it's coming. They're dreading it. How now? Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Come on, people. I actually sat there figuring out these movies. This doesn't happen out of thin air. So let's go to the next one. You're going to get this reference because many of you have seen this movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So most of you will get this if you've seen the movie. So I'll give you a clue. The movie is entirely about empathy in a marvelous sort of way. It was such an engaging movie. Made me laugh, made me just get shocked. Empathy, people. What term do we use to describe empathy that has the term shoe?
Walk a mile in their shoes.
Very good. Ta-da, you win. Nothing, but you win. Thank you, Anne. You're probably going to be walking a mile in your Nikes. Well done, you. So, one more. I did put this in there because I simply like to look at Rachel Weisz. She's fantastic. So, The Dead Ringers is the modern version of the David Cronenberg run from before. So it's about twins, people reversing roles. Oh, Anne, you're on a roll, Anne. What do you think it is? All right, no pressure. Shoe is on the other foot because you're swapping. So that's what this is for. And I'm going to assume everyone is to get this one. If I even know who the actor is, you will get this. Doris Day. Pun intended, she is straight-laced, but that's not the adage I'm looking for. It's just too easy. What is one of the first things that comes to mind on the character of Doris Day? Who knows what she was in real life, but the character she played? Goody Two Shoes. Ta-da!
Yeah.
You got that one?
Yeah.
Yay, Daryl. Well done, you. And you win nothing too, but thanks for playing. And finally, a blind woman locked in her apartment with a trio of killers out to get her. Wait until dark. She's terrified. And so the proverb for this one is, when you're absolutely terrified. Shaking in her shoes. Haha. So there's that. But the movies and shoes continue. So currently in theaters, we have the movie called Air, Nike shoes. There they are. Ben Affleck plays Phil Knight, the founder of the Nike shoe company. But we're going to go from movie stars now directly to shoes. Audrey Hepburn is synonymous with ballet flats. Hers were custom made by Salvatore Ferragamo. And it matters because she was a classically trained ballerina. And so she often paired ballet flats with everything from black pants to midi skirts, all of it. You'll see her often with ballet flats. And though Ferragamo is associated with Hollywood stars like Audrey Hepburn, Greta Garbo, Marilyn Monroe, he actually got his big break creating, I'm not kidding, 12,000 sandals for Cecil B. DeMille's movie, the silent movie, 10 Commandments. That's how he got a break. That's the beginning of Salvatore Ferragamo's tie-up with Hollywood. It's outside today's scope. My interest in Ferragamo is actually his wife, Wanda, and how at becoming a widow at the age of 38 with children and with absolutely no business acumen, she grew that shoe business into a global luxury brand. She died at 96. I like intelligent, bold women. Stupid isn't sexy. She's one of the most interesting persons, along with this other one, Veuve Clicquot, the champagne. It means widow Clicquot. It was the widow of the champagne owner, the son's widow, who made that brand famous. Fabulously interesting business and women. Okay. Speaking of sexy, Grace Kelly made comfort look elegant when she opted for flats over heels. She was also a very smart woman in the sense she knew when and where and how to wear heels brilliantly. And another one, sure of her own sexuality, Katharine Hepburn adopted the menswear trend right down to her flat-soled Oxford lace-ups. And now here comes the real twist. With elaborate floral embroidery and attenuated red leather heels, shoes like this closely mirrored the elegance of the women's gowns from that era. Now, though for generations now, high heels have signified femininity and glamour, high heels were originally an essential accessory for men. This is a man's high heel. Women only joined the high heel bandwagon in the 17th century onwards. So the high heel originated in the Near East, Persia onwards, where it was worn for centuries as a form of riding footwear. So high heels are the ironic horseshoes. That's what it was for. Good horsemanship was essential to the fighting style of Persia because they had great cavalry. Persia is modern-day Iran. So when the soldier stood up in his stirrups, the heel helped him to steady his stance so that he could shoot his bow and arrow more effectively. That's where the heels come in. So the end of the 16th century, Persia's Shah Abbas I had the largest cavalry in the world. And he was very keen to forge links with the rulers in Western Europe to help him defeat his great enemy, the Ottoman Empire. So in 1599, Abbas had sent his first Persian diplomatic mission to Europe. So his diplomatic mission went to Russia, Germany, Spain. Now keep in mind, Russia in those times and beyond, massively Francophile. They were huge followers of France. Whatever went on in Versailles was copied there. They spoke French. So all of this is being copied. And so there was a wave of interest in all things Persian. And this wave passed through Western Europe, along with shoes and design, love of stories, storytelling, Arabian Nights. These are all coming from Syria, all that Levant region, all of that is influencing what we associate with Europe and design. So Persian style shoes were enthusiastically adopted by the aristocrats, who sought to give their appearances a virile, masculine edge that it suddenly seemed could only be found in heeled shoes. And the Imelda Marcos of his day, because look, this is what a heeled shoe looked like. This is what they used to wear on horseback. Louis XIV, great king that he was diminutively proportioned. He was 5'4", just about an inch long, higher than me. So he supplemented his stature by a further 4 inches with heels. And often his heels depicted, battle scenes. And the heels and the soles were red. Because one, the red dye was expensive, and red carries a martial overtone. So please know, it's Louis, not Christian Louboutin, who needs to be credited for the French red-bottomed shoes, because everybody associates, oh, Louboutin red shoes. He didn't create it. Not that he ever says, I'm the designer for it. So in the 1670s, Louis XIV had issued an edict that only members of his court were allowed to wear red heels. So in theory, all anyone in French society had to do to check whether someone was in favor with the king was to glance downwards, peer at someone's soul, and not through the eye. So Louis XIV also had introduced the white shoe to match his hose, because he wore, if you can look, he's wearing white hose. But the red heel shoe still survived well into the 1760s. Something happened then. Revolution is brewing. So the term down on your heels is thought to relate to the habit of the rich towering over the poor. So the heels of men's shoes often were painted with miniature rustic, martial, or even romantic scenes. And different shapes were experimented with, including hourglass heels. I'm showing just one example to you. So you can see now when you see these designs in the shoe stores, they're not new. It's a wonderful way of preserving heritage. So now you can see where all these inspirations are coming from. Jeweled heels. History repeats. The term fits, doesn't it? Well-heeled. And in the Middle East onwards, then this is current, gold-heeled. Because Middle East and beyond, India and beyond, all of those areas, Dubai, love gold. They would actually sit there and look at LeBron's golden shoe and say, wait till I show you mine. So the French would have continued with their bliness were it not for their 18th century pesky reign of terror. So through the French Revolution, that's what had happened. Democracy became fashionable, and it started to seem rather unfashionable to tower over someone else due to social status. And so flatter shoes were adopted. The reason I'm saying all this, because the one part of the story that interests me in almost every story is the lived experience. How is someone experiencing these times? So flatter shoes were adopted because of the politics of the situation. So in Paris in 1789, members of the National Assembly had ceremoniously removed their precious shoe buckles. Remember, these are costly items for them, and donated them to the cause of the French Revolution. Gotta make big scenes. And so then the heels didn't make a comeback until the 19th century. And why did it come back then? It's because the photographers of pornographic photographs realized that women's butt look better if they're standing on heels. That's why. And it's because of these French postcards that high heels became associated with women rather than men in the 20th century. That was a big reason why fashion sets the trends through France. And Louis XIV had a stance with that. Before that, Italy dominated fashions. So love of shoes aren't solely a French trait. The German artist Dürer was quite a fashion fiend, and style always matters. He designed shoes. I mean, just about anybody would have bespoke shoes for the most part. And on the pattern of the sole, Dürer had written instructions. So all I'm doing is just zoning in on this section. And so some of the instructions says the shoe had to be cut in this way, and the ornament was to be pressed into the damp leather and so on. So he's telling them how to emboss the leather. Shoes were made from this pattern in Germany in like around 1974. And he showed that Dürer, had he lived, he would be wearing shoe size 8.5. So that would be the UK shoe size, I think. Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, men's size 7. And again, lived experience. Take a look at Dürer. his detailed, posed self-portrait. So imagine he's painting himself. This guy painted himself sideways. This is what he painted himself as. White leather gloves. All that planning, the look, the hair. Oh my God, the peacock. God knows he had ideas for his shoes. He would. Just imagine the details he would have suggested on that gilded leather shoes. The contrasting materials, the colors to draw attention to the shimmering quality of the gold. Don't you wish you actually saw what shoe this man wore? Now, he would have found a kindred spirit in England's Charles II. Now, I don't know if our recently anointed King Charles III is similar, but as mentioned, red heels were initially popularized in the French courts at Versailles. And Charles II, who happened to be a cousin of Louis XIV, had spent time at the French courts because he had been exiled for 14 years. And so he was eager to emulate the opulence he had seen at his cousin's court. Now, despite the fact that unlike his cousin Louis, who was 5'4", Charles II was 6 foot tall, 6 feet tall. Despite that, he wore high red heels, and he made sure that was adopted by the aristocracy, the nobility, in his restoration court. So I'm just simply zoning in on his shoes, along with bejeweled buckles. High heel shoes of that times were made of silks, brocades, and other expensive fabrics to further separate the nobility from the working men and women. And so it pretty much allowed visibility for their status. Look at me, quietly announcing their grandness. Look more, the king, he dons now pale chamois leather shoes with red heels, knots of silver lace and ribbon. And that's just a shoe. Men wanted to look taller because height lets them intimidate, to dominate. High heels weren't there simply for beauty. They radiated power. That's what the men wanted to have. And because women had long dresses, they hid the details. Heels were initially the domain of men. Unless you are a courtesan, especially in 16th century Italy. If that were your lifestyle, you would soon be adopting high heels, because the courtesans of 16th century Italy adopted high heels as a kind of sexy androgynous symbol. Because courtesans were supposed to please men, they pretty much interacted exclusively with men. And so they often liked things that were associated with men, things like reading. So that means they had access to libraries. If anything ever convinces me to be a courtesan, not happening, it would be a library. So reading, smoking, drinking, wearing heels so that they towered over everybody else. The men's points of view just like osmosis went into the women. And then the women topped them. The women wore crazy high heels. Some of these shoes are called chopines or chopines. I don't know how you say it in French, but they would be almost 10 inches tall. And the courtesans accessorized these shoes with a man. So the men became the accessory, and his job would be to support her as she walked down the street. So I think it's important that dramaturgs of opera companies need to be a bit more authentic. So next time they want to do La Traviata, perhaps Viola needs to be on massive heels in a library doing more than just simply Libiamo. She could be doing many more manly things. Staying with Italy, the wedding depicted on this panel, which was once part of a wedding chest, because they used to give dowries, the painting is about the subject, the biblical subject Esther, but they had put the action and the story in the 15th century Florence. And I think it helps with the moving the story forward about shoes. So dowries then consisted of goods such as clothing and jewelry, as well as money and property. And dowries are one of the greatest financial obligations that families faced. Sometimes gilded shoes were part of the trousseau. Because remember, women didn't have so many shoes to show off because they had long dresses. But they would have, if they had the money, some of them would have gilded shoes. Now, gilded shoes were not only expensive, but they were also ostentatious, despite sumptuary laws that were there in place to restrain luxury. People simply paid fines. People are people. If I want to do something, I will. I'll be happy to pay a fine for it. So sumptuary laws were flouted by just about everybody, including the popes. Have you seen the popes and the cardinals? There was nothing restrained about their style. So in Renaissance Europe, backless shoes or slippers that, like these that had a high platform, soles, these were called chopines, and they were also called pianelle in Italy. And so in the one that you're seeing now is, obviously velvet, gilded silver braid, the gold is running off, and you have bobbin lace, leather, and wood. So this is in Italy. But in Spain, the platform would be made of cork to lighten the shoe instead of using wood. And such details interest me beyond the beauty, because beauty can draw, but mere beauty is not enough. It doesn't sustain interest because you can just see one beautiful thing after the other. Same as people, not impressive. But in terms of the object itself, it's interesting to know, at least for me, and I hope you share the interest, while textiles could be embroidered with gilt thread, they could not be gilded. Only leather could be covered in gold leaf, which is gilding. And so even though Italian leathers were prized and valued, the really good leather came from Spain, and high quality Spanish leather were called Cordobans. So that's what they call those shoes. They were associated with the country, like we call French fries. Oh, please. No, joking. So yes, I can appreciate and be impressed by the bobbin lace. But the lived experience of these objects are of a much greater interest, and the reason why this subject was chosen. I like learning that the cost of a colt or pony leather was much more expensive than sheepskin. Because in these times, remember, England is coming into power. It's the wealth of the wool that makes Henry VIII and all those people come into power. The alum markets in Champagne. Champagne back then was not known for champagne drink. It was known for the alums, these mordants that they use for dyes. So the sheepskin wasn't expensive, pony leather was. And who would care about all these? The leather guilds. The guilds would care deeply. Trade affects by fashion, even now. And so these women who wore long dresses, and you couldn't see their shoes, and they were not as valuable, women's shoes, in a larger context than men. Why do I care about this? Why am I so interested in this aspect? And it's not because of the craftsmanship or the material, though all of that is, acknowledged, and the status and the honor that comes with all this splendid appearance. What interests me is that the childbirth that follows a marriage brought the issue of the woman's trousseau to the forefront. Why is that? Because something that we don't consider, many women would become deeply concerned about the distribution of their trousseau during childbirth, because during those times, childbirth also signals she could die. Many died at childbirth. And so that becomes very important. Can you imagine that? You're about to give birth, you might be dying. It happened quite often. So then her primary concern became, who would get parts of my trousseau, including gilded shoes, parts of what she's giving. Through the wills of these recently deceased women, because you do have access to some, there are archives, through the distribution of the dowries for their daughters, one gets a broadened understanding of women's histories. Through shoes, through garments, through textiles, through jewelry, one can map these social networks, and to no small measure, the symbolic value these objects held for the daughters of the deceased mothers. That interests me deeply. Because what happens? How is life being experienced then for these women? Even the men, but I just to pick something with terms of time. So what are the women doing? And these are designs from the Venetian shoes, because I'm just going to go through, because the important story to me is much larger. Look, mother of pearls in the shoes. Women traded styles, designs, and not just for the shoes, they traded designs for the sleeves of their dresses. Now, Dürer, who was so particular about shoes, and he had other options. So imagine when you're cloistered in that very limited sphere of wardrobe control. Women's wardrobes were emotionally laden. The materials that they found and commissioned, I guess I can apply commissioned wardrobes and shoes, they absorbed these emotions and forged human associations. So now, with that in mind, please don't view these objects as mere shoes, and also extrapolate meaning to the other objects that these women would have owned, that the daughters would inherit the household goods that belonged to their mothers. And so it's that lived experience that draws, isn't it? So imagine the feeling of a motherless child. She grew up alone because the mother died at childbirth. When that child comes into age, she's going to inherit her dead mother's gilded Chopins. The first time she steps into them with her adult feet to literally walk in her mother's shoes, a mother she hasn't ever experienced. She will experience them now because what happens? Bespoke footwear are really evocative because of the three-dimensionality of these shoes. They preserve the shape of the body who had once worn it. And so you literally step in and you feel, where did my mother step? These things matter to me much more than the cost of the materials, although I recognize and I see the importance of them. So footwear proclaimed familiar honor, right? You have a beautiful shoe, you must have value, but it's much more than that. Gilded shoes had princely connotation, but these transcended monetary value. Because when you inherited the stuff, shoes are also embodying the value of the clan through which you're coming in these arranged marriages, because this is not Romeo and Juliet marriage. Most of these were business contracts. And by getting inherited shoes, it connects a daughter directly to the mother and thereby preserves the familial past. It is so rich with history. It is this lived experience. Behold the effects of the Silk Road. Because how did these Venetian women, because by then there is no Italy, it's all city-states, women from Venice, women from Florence, how did they all develop this style? They got it from Persia. From Persia came silk, and along with silk came style. Because remember, Venice is a trade city. Among other things, it also was a slave trade city. So Venice was a very powerful city. It had money, and in came new ideas and style. And so Persian style influenced the shoe designs in Venice, which then influenced everywhere else, because until France came into power, Venice set the styles. So a shoemaker's creativity, the one that I showed earlier, look, he inlaid mother of pearl, nacre, into the shoes. They were limitless. Sometimes they put that, other times they painted it. They did what they can. You can see the shoemaker in here. What was he thinking? Now, some say heel shoes were developed by the Persians. Because, Persia, according to the story, because it's so hot and sandy, because it's parts of Iran, they thought they placed wooden blocks beneath the sole of the sandals in order to isolate the feet from the scorching sand. Because isn't it ironic? Sand burns more than the direct sunlight on your skin. Hot sand is unbearable. You can at least bear the sun. So protecting footwear, because you will protect these, like, those overlays, shoes that we saw in Egypt, brings us to something that many of you will notice and recognize. Spats, which is short for spatterdashers. So these are spatter guards. It's you can get them even now. It protects the instep and the ankle, so you don't have mud splatter on it. So when you had horses, not cars, all that horse leftovers in the mud, you don't want them splattering on your lovely shoes because shoes were expensive. And again, even this concept of spats is just history repeating, because spats existed before and you have seen them, except maybe didn't realize them. In the 14th century, I'm going to point now, these things, patterns. So they were used to be called patterns. I'm sure you've seen Van Eyck's painting. This is very, very famous painting. So they would use these patterns to put over their shoes, the top of their shoes, so the shoes don't get dirty. And those patterns, almost like a sock over the shoe, had to be the same shape. So now you get to look at the Van Eyck's painting in a new light. Look now, the clogs nearby. Because I have seen often art books skip these details. They'll talk a lot about the mirror and the reflection and the writing and the green and the pregnancy and all that it symbolizes. Well, no, don't skip the shoes. They're telling a lived experience. It's telling a lot of the story. So let's walk in their shoes. The pattern would cover the distinctive singular shoe style of that medieval period, which was called the poulain. You see the poulain here, and you will see its armored version right here. This is what people wore. And look at this. Here is Comme des Garçons' modern day recreation of the poulain. I love this fact that they're doing this. I won't wear it, but that doesn't matter. Why do I care? Because it shows intelligent research for this design. Because reinterpretation is a form of preservation. Here is the Poulain design in Comme des Garçons. I love this. If you know your history, you get to appreciate this more than just a novelty. You go, ah, who designed this? You are an intelligent company. Then look here. Completely impractical luxury. What does that mean? It means it's signaling to someone, I have heaps of money. I am not you. That's a big part of these things. It's just to signal, look at me. That's what this is for. History just keeps repeating in so many ways. This is from Japan, and here are traditional shoes from Japan, the geta, and the socks that are worn. These would be called tabi. So I'm only touching upon this because I want to show shoes have a story across all cultures, everywhere, even Eskimo. So these garden shoes for the Japanese garden, parts of sandals are called zori. So they have a very strict setup. Outside sandals don't come inside the house. You have sandals for different setups. These would have been made of bamboo. And again, sandals of any types would not be worn inside, though. They would not be worn indoors. They would be completely separate shoes, sandal looking, but they were not sandals. So waraji was the outdoor footwear, and they used to be tied like this. Why am I showing this? Because again, lived experience. Look at the rich history and tradition of warajis being made. Note the twine warp held between the hands and the toes, and the loose fiber weft to his right. So what is it happening right here? He's spending time with his child, or maybe that's his nephew, bonding, likely in the afternoon sun. We're obviously against giving cultures, but what is true here is true everywhere. Eskimos making shoes. They didn't go to the store and buy a shoe. All this had to be done. This is how we experience humanity. From Japan, we go to China. This Chinese lady in a red dress resting on a couch before an open window. Why is this here? Well, okay, I'll zoom in. It's important for the narrative. Right there. That's not a perspective problem. That is exactly correct. Take a closer look. The Chinese practice of foot binding, introduced just before or during the Song dynasty, involved tightly wrapping the feet of young girls to prevent the feet from growing. So that habit has been banned in 1911 because it is a brutal and disabling practice. Bound feet during those times and culture showed that the girl was well brought up and a good marriage prospect. Now, I want to thank my friends for allowing me to access their private collection. Here is a lotus shoe, right? Okay, look at the perspective. This is my hand. There is the hand. Look at the size of the shoe. Now imagine the size of the feet that goes into that shoe. This is my hand. It's smaller than my hand. Now imagine the imbalance of the body that has such tiny feet. Yes, the craftsmanship is impressive, but still conceptually dirty, pretty things. Yes, it's whimsically designed. It's charming to look at, and undoubtedly made with a lot of love and pride. And the attention to detail is staggering. Look, they even put the attention beneath the shoe. I thought I had Shoma imprinted underneath. Look at what they do. Amazing. Still, no, look at what it's used for. I love the details of these shoes. Look at the tails. Charming. But cute as they are, they're actually anything but. Look what happens. The toes, which are wrapped under the foot for the bound foot, and the great toe is going to bend in underneath. Exclusive of the heel, it becomes cone-shaped. And the effect of foot binding is a broken high arch, all for beauty, or their version of beauty. I don't ever want to walk in their shoes, ever. This is not pretty. I don't care what it looks like, not pretty at all. And ironically, this shoe, I mean, look at the details they put in. It's still ugly to me. This shoe has an embroidered band of pine trees and flowers. The irony there is that those things, pine trees, symbolize eternity. Can you imagine the pain of a child having that kind of foot for years? What kind of life is that? I have no idea. But yes, I can appreciate the applique cloud patterns of the flower bowl shoes that one sees here. The craftsmanship is beautiful. And the names are so evocative. Flower bowl shoes. Juxtapose that with Jimmy Choo's popular shoe, the Lance. It's just not pretty. These are done so beautifully. Look at this horse hoof shoe. Makes absolute sense. So I did not want this presentation to become like an Instagram version of look how pretty shoes. That's not the point. And time does prevent us from delving into the cultural significance of shoes in other parts of the world. Because throwing a shoe at someone, hitting someone with a shoe, is the ultimate form of disgrace in parts of the Middle East and India. We also know there's a variety of shoes: tap shoes, soccer cleats, rain shoes, Wellingtons that have become a fashion statement. Also, this is a 3D printed shoe because this one in the center was inspired by Ridley Scott's sci-fi movie, The Alien. And this is called the Titanic because it lets you envision the green and everything, the boat sinking and what it's missing out. So this is Alexander McQueen, very thoughtful design. But look at this alien one. This is 3D printed. And speaking of alien, quite a shoe out of this world, the shoe of an astronaut. And this boot was part of the pair that was made for and worn by Eugene Cernan. The reason I like Cernan because Cernan was from, I think, Elgin. So from here, there's a Cernan observatory. And he had landed on the moon in 1972. And I would definitely very much like to walk a mile in these shoes on my namesake habitat in the moon. We will now return to Earth for terrestrial prints. And I really wish we had time for this because I love showing this. I mean, forgive the quality of the picture because you can see the reflection from my bedroom window. Doesn't matter. This is what I wanted to show you. This single line footprint, obviously from a wild animal. Such a thing is called direct register. The grace with which wild animals move, back hind feet landing directly on their front feet, flawless grace. Juxtapose that with how human beings work. As I told my kid, go walk the best you can, just to take a picture. The best of us, we cannot mimic this. I wish we had time to show all this. But the premise of this presentation on shoes was the concept of journey, of moving. And here, the spirituality is aligned in a way to represent the Buddha. Buddha should never be represented by statues, but at best, perhaps as a relief of the foot. So the relief comes out because he has ascended. No shoes here. But it's still important to see Buddhist statues because the ones from the Gandhara period, look at this. They're interesting for a completely different reason. Look, he's wearing boots. Look at the slippers, but more interestingly, look at the boots. Which part of India is wearing boots? These are all the influences of the outside that show up in the artistry because the Gandhara statues were influenced by Greece and all of that area had influence. Kushan, all of this is influencing the design. I really like that aspect of it. And they have a great statue, one with clearly you can see the boot in the Art Institute of Chicago. Hopefully it's still out on display. I don't know. But these are what the traditional shoes of India would have been. They called them paduka, and also they were called, if they were less heeled in the religious aspect, they would be called korum. So it would look flat like this without this heel. And in the Indian epic Ramayana, in that story, this Prince Bharat acted as a regent for his elder brother who had been, sent away from his place by his father on exile. And so the little brother said, I will rule in your place as a regent, but I will put your shoes, your korum on this throne. So I will forever be serving you. So that's the symbolic. He's coming back with the korum. That's the picture here. Why am I doing this? Okay. Kangra paintings from India have these, Kangra is a different region up by Himachal in Himalayas. The paintings have a lyrical quality. So I like that. In this picture, what you are seeing is Ram, the hero, is getting a thorn pulled out from his foot by his brother while he's exiled. And this is a very appropriate finality for this narrative. This timing is perfect. I'd grown up with this story about shoes, which in my youth I thought was merely funny. Now I realize the larger meaning. And to expand the applicability of the message, the next 3 pictures will be universal imagery, not Indian imagery. So the story in a nutshell says that once upon a time, a king had got a thorn stuck in his foot. Entitled king got enraged. And so he ordered his ministers to cover the entire earth so that he doesn't get injured again by any thorn or thistle. And so off goes his people. But his chief counsel realized this idea of throwing the baby away with the bathwater. If you cover the entire earth with leather, you smother all of this as well. And so he calmly suggested, Sire, why don't we instead just cover the bottom of our own souls with leather? The less harmful, more efficient solution. Now, as a child, I had thought that this was a parable about how shoes came into being. Over the last almost 50 years, I have traveled much further to a richer, deeper meaning. And I assume you know which meaning I'm talking about. So, exactly 2:30. I'm so glad I didn't go over, but I'm so grateful that you take the time to join us. I thank you for your time as always, because next month it's going to be on map making. And because the day is beautiful, I'm going to try to get off the thing so that you can go enjoy the day. Thank you for your time again, and I wish you joy.